Ever think about what it would be like to be considered missing for like 80 years?
Wow.
That's exactly what happened to a World War II airman named Sanford G. Roy.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to dive into his story today.
Okay.
You sent over some articles about him, and it's just this crazy mix of like history, science, and a kind of bittersweet homecoming.
Yeah, Sanford Roy's story really hits home the fact that there are still so many untold stories from World War II.
For sure.
Like, even after all this time, we're still figuring out what happened to so many people.
Totally. So to understand this, we got to go back, right?
Okay.
Back to 1944.
Yeah.
Europe's a complete mess.
Right.
It's the peak of World War II.
Uh-huh.
And it's especially risky for those bomber crews flying over Germany.
Absolutely.
And our guy, Sanford G. Roy, he was from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
And he was one of these brave airmen, part of a crew on a B-24H Liberator.
Mm-hmm.
They called it Little Joe. And on one mission, their plane just disappears.
Oh, wow.
No survivors, no wreckage. Just this huge question mark.
Yeah.
Listed as missing.
You know, for the families back home, I can't even imagine that, right? Not knowing what happened to their loved ones, not for years, but decades. That must have been just an unbelievable weight to carry.
Absolutely. And going through these articles, it's pretty clear that during the war, the search efforts were, well, kind of limited.
Yeah.
I get it, things were chaotic, but they managed to investigate some crash sites. So why not this one?
Right. Well, you got to remember just how huge that war was. So many planes went down. I mean, we're talking countless missing men. And in the middle of all that fighting, trying to track each incident, logistically, that must have been a total nightmare.
Right.
Plus, the focus was obviously on winning the war.
Right. So years go by, decades even.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1946, the American Graves Registration Command, they start looking into these missing bomber crews.
Mm.
But even then, Little Joe remains a mystery.
And that just shows you how dedicated these people were, but also how massive this task was. Just imagine trying to find one specific crash site in Europe years after a war. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, a needle in a haystack. But then 2015 rolls around and things start to change.
Yeah.
We get the Missing Allied Aircrew Research Team. These are independent folks dedicated to uncovering these forgotten stories. What's so fascinating is how they do it. They use historical archives, new technology.
Yeah.
They're like history detectives.
Absolutely. They've got more time and resources to focus on specific cases compared to the official organizations, And tech has been huge: aerial photography, ground-penetrating radar. They can even access stuff that used to be top secret.
Right.
All of this helps them piece together these events from so long ago.
And in this case, they actually make a breakthrough. They find a possible crash site near Wisted, Germany, and contact the DPAA. That's the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency. They're basically the experts in finding and identifying our missing service members.
What are some of the challenges they face when they're dealing with remains that are, so old?
Oh man, where do I even start?
Yeah.
The environment plays a big role. The condition of the remains, you often have very few records. It's like trying to do a puzzle, but most of the pieces are missing.
Yeah.
But the biggest game changer, DNA analysis.
Oh, wow.
They can take DNA from the remains and compare it to samples from family.
Wow.
And even after decades, they can often make a positive ID.
That's amazing. So the DPA, they're working with locals, right?
Right.
And they discovered there were actually 2 crash sites.
Wow.
But only one had been properly investigated. This is where local knowledge can be so valuable. Eyewitness accounts might fade, but those stories, they stick around in those communities. It's amazing how local knowledge can be passed down. But you always have to be careful, right? I mean, how do you separate fact from fiction? But the DPAA, they're pros. They confirm these stories with real evidence and historical records.
Like a historical puzzle.
Exactly.
You check out the second site,
Mm-hmm.
and incredibly they find wreckage and even possible human remains.
Oh, wow.
Through some very careful analysis, they're able to identify not only Tech, Seth G. Roy, but also Staff Sergeant Ralph L. Moore. It's got to be bittersweet for the families, right? Closure after all this time,
Yeah.
but also a reminder of what war really costs.
Absolutely. And it's incredible to think about those rosettes next to their names on the walls of the missing. It's not just a name etched in stone. It's someone who is finally coming home.
And Sanford G. Roy will be buried in Chattanooga on April 8th, 2025.
Wow.
81 years to the day after the crash. This story, it's remarkable with the 80-year gap and everything, but it also represents so many others who are still out there waiting to be found.
Yeah, and this case really shows just how important the work is that groups like the Missing Allied Aircrew Research Team and the DPAA do. Science, and especially DNA technology, has helped bring families closure after all these years.
It's incredible how much progress has been made. And as tech keeps advancing, who knows what other mysteries we might be able to crack. It makes you think about how many more families could still get answers, even after all this time.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Until next time.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.